The savage chorus of 24 military working dogs ripped through the morning air at Naval Special Warfare K-9 training facility, like a declaration of war against silence itself. Each bark carried the weight of combat experience, the echo of foreign battlefields, the promise of violence contained only by chain-link fences and the iron will of their handlers. Senior Chief Brick Holloway stood with his arms crossed in front of the main kennel compound, watching the small figure approach from the security checkpoint with the kind of contempt usually reserved for civilians who wandered too close to classified operations. His jaw, square as a cinder block and twice as hard, worked slowly on a piece of gum as he assessed the woman walking toward him, 5 feet 4 inches, maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. Brown hair pulled back in a loose ponytail that would last about 3 seconds in any real tactical situation. Wearing clothes that looked like they came from a thrift store clearance rack, hands clutching a crumpled job application like it was a winning lottery ticket. Brick had seen plenty of people try to infiltrate the world of special operations through the back door. Wives of deployed operators looking for connection, wannabe tough girls who watch too many movies, social media influencers hoping to pose with attack dogs for clout. This woman fit none of those categories exactly, but she clearly did not belong here. "You think you're somebody who can just walk in here and ask for a job?" The words came out as more statement than question. Brick did not move from his position of authority, forcing the woman to come to him, to cross the remaining 20 feet of gravel like a supplicant approaching a throne. Willow Hayes stopped at the appropriate distance, not too close to seem aggressive, not too far to seem afraid. She simply stood there, application in hand, face carefully neutral. Brick noticed that neutrality, found it annoying. "These dogs behind me," he continued, jerking his thumb toward the kennel complex, "have killed more Taliban fighters than you've had hot meals. They have been trained to detect explosives, track human scent across mountains, and tear out throats on command." He stepped forward, close enough to smell the cheap shampoo in her hair. "They'll crush someone like you in 3 seconds flat." Around them, 5 SEAL handlers had stopped to their morning routines to watch the entertainment. Logan Vance, a mountain of muscle standing 6 feet 3, with forearms like ham hocks, leaned against a fence post with a predator's smile. Crystal Marsh, the administrative specialist who controlled the social hierarchy of the facility through strategic gossip, covered her mouth to hide her amusement. Fletcher Dunn held his tablet like a shield, already running background checks out of habit. The barking from the kennels intensified, as if the dogs themselves were joining in the mockery. "Let her in," Logan called out, his voice carrying the lazy confidence of a man who had never lost a fight. "I want to see how fast she runs." Crystal laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Remember that girl last week? The one who wanted to be a handler? She made it 12 minutes before crying in the parking lot. $10 says this one doesn't last 5. Willow did not react to the betting pool forming around her humiliation. She simply extended the application toward Brick, holding it steady despite the hostile attention focused on her from every direction. Brick snatched the paper, glanced at it, and made a show of reading the relevant sections aloud for everyone's benefit. Willow Hayes, age 32, previous military experience, none. Animal handling certification, none. Relevant training, none. He crumpled the application slightly, just enough to show contempt without completely destroying it. "What exactly do you think qualifies you to work with military working dogs?" "I have a connection with them." Her voice was quiet, steady. The first words she had spoken since arriving at the facility. Brick blinked. Then he laughed, a harsh bark of disbelief that triggered similar reactions from his assembled audience. "A connection? Lady, this isn't some dog park where you throw tennis balls and scratch bellies. These animals are weapon systems worth more than your entire life savings. They respond to command, to discipline, to years of specialized training." He leaned in, using his height advantage to loom over her. "Not to feelings." Lieutenant Commander Cyrus Dalton emerged from the administrative building at that moment, drawn by the commotion. His uniform was pressed to regulation perfection, his silver oak leaves gleaming in the morning sun. He approached with the measured stride of an officer who believed rank conveyed wisdom and civilian presence represented potential security breaches. "What's happening here, Senior Chief?" Brick straightened slightly. "Job applicant, sir, for the kennel assistant position." Cyrus took the crumpled application from Brick's hand, smoothing it against his thigh as he scanned the contents. His expression shifted from curious to skeptical to openly dismissive in the span of 15 seconds. No experience, no training, no background in military operations whatsoever. He looked at Willow the way a professor might examine a student who had wandered into the wrong lecture hall. "Are you aware of what we do here, Miss Hayes?" "I have some understanding, sir." "Do you? Do you understand that these dogs have deployment histories longer than most enlisted careers? That they've participated in operations you'll never read about in newspapers? That they're capable of actions you couldn't imagine in your worst nightmares?" Cyrus handed the application back to Brick. "This facility isn't a petting zoo. We don't hire based on enthusiasm or self-proclaimed spiritual connections with animals." Fletcher Dunn approached with his tablet, always eager to provide technical ammunition for rejection. "Sir, I've run a preliminary background check. She's clean, but completely unremarkable. No red flags because there's nothing there at all. No military family connections, no relevant employment history, no apparent reason for her to be here." "There you have it," Cyrus nodded toward the main gate. "Thank you for your interest, Miss Hayes. Security will escort you out." Willow did not move. The dogs, which had been barking continuously since her arrival, suddenly fell silent. The change was so abrupt, so complete, that everyone froze. The facility existed in a constant state of controlled chaos, the soundtrack of barking and growling, as much a part of the environment as the Virginia humidity. Silence from the kennels was as unnatural as snow in August. Logan was the first to notice. "What the hell?" Brick turned toward the kennel complex, his trained instincts immediately alert for signs of danger. 24 dogs, all of them veterans of combat deployments, all of them conditioned to respond to specific stimuli with specific behaviors. None of them were supposed to fall silent simultaneously without a direct command. "Who gave the quiet order?" Brick demanded. "Which handler signaled them?" No one had. Every handler was accounted for, standing in confused clusters between the administrative building and the kennels. The dogs had simply stopped barking on their own. Willow turned her head slightly, looking toward the kennel complex with an expression that seemed almost expectant, like she was waiting for something, like she knew something none of them understood. Brick caught the look, found it unsettling in ways he could not articulate. "You did something. I haven't done anything. Then why did they stop?" Willow met his eyes. "Maybe they're waiting." "Waiting for what?" She did not answer. Instead, she walked past Brick, past Side Iris, past the assembled handlers and administrative staff, moving toward the kennel complex with a calm that bordered on inexplicable. Her feet crunched on gravel with a steady rhythm, her shoulders square, her gaze fixed on the chain-link fencing that contained the most dangerous military working dogs in the Navy's arsenal. "Hey," Brick started after her, "you can't just walk in there without authorization." "Then authorize me." The simplicity of her response stopped him cold. She was not asking permission. She was not pleading for a chance. She was stating a fact and waiting for reality to catch up with her certainty. Cyrus stepped forward, his authority challenged by this strange civilian who seemed to operate by rules no one else understood. "Miss Hayes, I'm ordering you to stop." Willow stopped, but she did not turn around. Her attention remained fixed on the kennel complex, on the silent dogs that waited beyond the fence. "If you enter that compound without proper authorization and escort," Cyrus continued, "you'll be charged with trespassing on a military installation. You'll be arrested. Your record will no longer be clean." "Then give me proper authorization," Brick made a decision. "You know what? Fine. Let's do this." He pushed past Cyrus, ignoring the officer's look of surprise. "She wants to prove she belongs here? Let's prove she doesn't. Open the gate." He pointed at Logan. "Get me a liability waiver." "Brick, this is highly irregular," Cyrus protested. "Sir, with respect, she's not going to leave until we show her why she should. 5 minutes with those dogs will accomplish what an hour of arguing won't." Brick turned to Willow with a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "You want a connection with military working dogs? Let's see how connected you feel when a 24 Belgian Malinois are deciding whether you're a friend or a chew toy." Logan returned with the waiver, a legal document absolving the Navy of responsibility for whatever happened next. Willow took the pen, signed without reading, and handed it back. Crystal noticed the way she held the pen, gripped between the index and middle finger rather than the traditional thumb and forefinger position. Strange, distinctive, the kind of grip you might see from someone who spent thousands of hours holding other instruments in high-stress situations. Weird, Crystal muttered to herself, filing the observation away for later gossip. The gate to the kennel compound swung open with a metallic screech that seemed too loud in the unnatural silence. 24 Belgian Malinois stood at attention in their individual runs, ears forward, bodies still, eyes tracking Willow's approach with an intensity that made several handlers reach instinctively for their sidearms. "They're not supposed to do that," one handler whispered. "They're never all focused on the same thing at the same time." Willow stepped busy through the gate. The gravel crunched under her shoes as she walked the central path between the rows of kennels. Left side, 12 dogs. Right side, 12 more, all of them watching her. All of them silent. All of them waiting for something only they understood. She stopped in the middle of the compound. "Well," Brick called from the gate, "where's this amazing connection you keep talking about?" Willow did not respond to him. Her attention was focused on the kennel directly in front of her, where a Belgian Malinois larger than the others stood, with his head slightly lowered, nostrils flaring as he processed her scent. Thor, the Alpha, the most decorated military working dog in the facility's history. 3 deployments, 17 confirmed apprehensions. One handler's hand, bitten clean through when a new trainee made the mistake of approaching without proper protocol. Thor had not allowed anyone except his assigned handler to touch him in over 4 years. Willow took a step toward his kennel, then another. Then she stopped directly in front of the chain-link door, barely 2 feet separating her from an animal capable of killing in seconds. "That's close enough," Brick shouted. "Thor doesn't tolerate strangers. He'll take your arm off." Willow crouched down, putting herself at eye level with the massive dog. Her movement was slow, deliberate, without any hint of the fear that should have been evident in someone facing an apex predator. Thor's posture shifted, his head lowered further. His ears, which had been rigidly forward, relaxed slightly. A sound emerged from his throat, something between a whine and a growl, as if he were struggling to reconcile contradictory impulses. And then he did something impossible. He bowed, not a submissive crouch, not a fearful collapse. Thor, the Alpha, the warrior, the untouchable king of this kennel kingdom, lowered his front legs and dropped his head in a gesture of profound respect. "No way," Logan breathed. "That's not possible." Willow reached through the chain link, her small hand extending toward Thor's massive head without hesitation. The dog did not snap, did not growl. He leaned into her touch like a child greeting a long-lost parent, his entire body relaxing as her fingers found the spot behind his ears. "Hey boy," she whispered, her voice carrying clearly in the silence. "You still remember me, don't you?" Thor's response was a soft whine, his tail beginning a slow wag that seemed almost embarrassed in its enthusiasm. The other dogs began to move. One by one, they approached the fronts of their kennels, pressing against chain link, straining toward the woman who had somehow earned the Alpha's submission without speaking a word of command. Brick found his voice. "What did you do to them? What's your trick?" Willow did not answer. She was too focused on Thor, her hands moving across his scarred hide with the familiarity of someone relearning a beloved geography. Her fingers found a raised ridge of tissue on his left shoulder, a scar that still showed through his fur. She paused there, her expression shifting to something that might have been guilt. "Still hurts, doesn't it?" she murmured. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better." Fletcher was recording everything on his tablet, his analytical mind struggling to categorize what he was witnessing. The technique she used to approach the dog, the way she read his body language, the specific locations she touched first, all of it spoke to a level of training that completely contradicted her application. "She's no amateur," he said to himself. "Whatever she is, she's definitely no amateur." Before we continue, here's something every dog lover needs to know. Protecting your furry companion is more than love. It's preparation. That's why thousands of military families trust Patriot Paws Insurance. Comprehensive coverage for your 4-legged heroes, from routine checkups to emergency care. Because they protect us, we protect them. Click the link in the description and use code ANGEL6 for 20% off your first month. Now, back to Willow and the 24 dogs who refused to leave her side. Brick stormed into the kennel compound, his patience finally exhausted. "All right, party's over. Whatever circus trick you're using, it ends now. Thor, heal!" The command echoed through the compound, with the force of thousands of hours of training behind it. Thor had been conditioned since puppyhood to respond to that word with immediate compliance. His muscles should have been moving before his brain even processed the command. Thor did not move. Thor, heel, now. The dog pressed closer to Willow, positioning his body between her and the approaching senior chief. Brick stopped cold. In 12 years of handling military working dogs, he had never experienced outright defiance. Dogs were trained to obey. It was the foundation of everything they did, the cornerstone of their value as military assets. A dog that did not obey was useless, worse than useless, dangerous. And yet, here was Thor, the most reliable dog in the compound, ignoring a direct command from a handler he had worked with for 3 years. "What did you do to him?" Brick's voice had shifted from confident authority to barely concealed panic. "I didn't do anything to him." Willow stood slowly, her hand remaining on Thor's head. "I just reminded him of something he already knew." "That's not how dogs work. That's not how any of this works." The other dogs had begun making noise again, but not the aggressive barking that had greeted Willow's arrival. This was different. Whines and yips of recognition, tails wagging, bodies pressed against kennel doors as if trying to reach her. Logan pushed past Brick, his considerable bulk blocking Willow's path. "I don't know what kind of scam you're running, lady, but it ends right now. These are military assets, not your personal pets." "I never said they were pets." "Then what are they?" Willow looked at the dogs surrounding her, 24 warriors in fur coats, each one carrying stories of sacrifice that would never make the newspapers. "They're family." Logan laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Family? You've been here for 10 minutes. I've worked with these dogs for 3 years. I've fed them, trained them, deployed with them. You're nothing to them. Then why won't they leave me?" It was a simple question. It should not have been devastating, but as Logan looked around at the dogs who had abandoned their stations to cluster around this strange civilian woman, he found himself without an answer. Crystal Marsh had ventured closer to the kennel fence, her phone recording everything for reasons she would later claim were purely documentation-related. "This is insane," she muttered. "They're acting like she's their handler, like she's been their handler forever." "That's impossible," Fletcher said, still reviewing data on his tablet. "I ran her through every database we have access to. There's no Willow Hayes in any military system, past or present. She's not a handler, she's not a veteran, she's nobody." But she was not nobody to the dogs. Hazel Monroe appeared at the kennel fence, drawn from the nearby canteen by the commotion. Her brother Jasper had mentioned something about a job applicant, but nothing in his description had prepared her for what she was witnessing. 24 of the most dangerous dogs in the Navy's inventory, clustered around a small woman like puppies around their mother. "What's happening?" she asked the nearest handler. "We have no idea." Hazel studied the woman in the center of the compound. There was something about her, something in the way she stood, the way she moved, the way her eyes constantly scanned the environment, even while her attention seemed focused on the dogs. Hazel had grown up around military personnel. Her father had served. Her brother served. Her husband had deployed 3 times before an IED ended his career. She recognized that posture. She recognized that awareness. "She's one of us," Hazel whispered. "I don't know how, but she's one of us." Cyrus Dalton pushed through the gathered observers, his officer's composure cracking under the weight of inexplicable events. "Someone explain to me what is happening in my facility." "Sir, the dogs won't respond to commands," Brick reported, his voice clipped with frustration. "They've imprinted on the civilian somehow. Every standard protocol is failing." "That's not possible." "I know it's not possible, sir, but it's happening." Cyrus turned his attention to Willow, approaching the kennel fence with the measured stride of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Miss Hayes, I don't know what psychological manipulation you're employing, but I'm ordering you to release these animals immediately." "I'm not holding them, sir. They're choosing to stay." "Dogs don't choose. They respond to training." Willow finally turned to face him directly, her expression still maddeningly calm. Clearly, these dogs disagree. The sound of a vehicle approaching interrupted the confrontation. A black SUV with government plates pulled into the facility's main parking area, its tinted windows revealing nothing of its occupants. The handlers exchanged nervous glances. Unannounced visitors usually meant inspections, and inspections during whatever this was would be catastrophic for everyone's careers. The driver's door opened first, followed by the rear passenger door. A figure emerged from the back seat, moving with the purposeful economy of motion that came from decades of special operations service. Silver hair cropped military short, a chest full of ribbons that told stories of classified heroism, stars on the collar that demanded immediate respect. Master Chief Solomon Crawford had not been scheduled to visit the K9 facility today, but Solomon had heard things, rumors, whispers on channels that technically did not exist, a name that should not have been spoken anywhere near Virginia Beach. He approached the kennel compound with a face carved from stone, revealing nothing of the war raging behind his eyes. "Master Chief on deck," someone shouted, and suddenly everyone was snapping to attention, their bodies responding to years of training, even as their minds struggled to process the morning's events. Everyone except Willow, who remained in the center of the compound, surrounded by dogs who still refused to leave her side. Solomon stopped at the kennel fence, his eyes scanning the impossible scene before him. 24 military working dogs, clustered around a civilian woman like a protective detail around a principal. Thor, the alpha, the untouchable, pressed against her leg like a personal bodyguard. And the woman herself. Solomon had memorized a face once, memorized it because he owed that face his life, memorized it because that face had flown into hell 3 times in one night to pull him and his brothers from the fire, memorized it because that face had been declared dead, burned beyond recognition in the wreckage of a helicopter that should never have made it back for a third extraction. The face had changed. Burns and surgeries and years of recovery had altered the geography, but the eyes remained the same. Those haunted, determined, impossibly calm eyes that had looked at him through the smoke and flame and said the words that still echoed in his nightmares. "I'll come back for the others." Solomon's hand trembled slightly as he gripped the chain-link fence. "Who has authorized this civilian's presence in the kennel compound?" Brick stepped forward. "Sir, she's a job applicant. We were demonstrating why she isn't qualified when the dogs began behaving unusually." "Unusually how?" "They won't respond to commands, sir. They've clustered around her and refused to disperse." Solomon's eyes never left Willow. "The dogs know something you don't, Senior Chief." "Sir, open the gate. I'm going in." "Master Chief, with respect, the situation is unstable. We don't know what she's done to compromise the dog's training." "She hasn't compromised anything." Solomon's voice carried a weight that silenced all further protest. "Open the gate." The gate swung open, and Solomon Crawford stepped into the kennel compound. The dogs parted for him, recognizing his authority, but they did not leave Willow's side. They simply made room for another person they deemed worthy of their circle. Solomon stopped 3 feet from Willow, close enough to see the fine scars that traced across her jaw and neck, the evidence of reconstruction that only trained eyes would notice. Close enough to smell the faint hint of burn cream that never quite left skin that had been melted and rebuilt. "I know those eyes," he said quietly. His words meant only for her. "I've seen them before, in a place that doesn't exist, on a night that never happened." Willow did not respond, but something flickered across her face. Recognition, acknowledgement, the shared language of people who had survived things that could not be spoken aloud. "Kandahar," Solomon continued. "November 13th, 2019. Operation Crimson Dawn." A muscle twitched in Willow's jaw. Thor pressed closer to her leg, sensing her tension. 47 SEALs trapped behind enemy lines. 24 K9 assets. Helicopter support requested but denied due to heavy anti-aircraft fire. Solomon's voice had dropped to barely a whisper. One pilot ignored the denial, flew into a hot zone that had claimed 17 aircraft that night, made 3 extractions when everyone else said it couldn't be done even once. Willow remained silent, but her breathing had changed, shorter, more controlled, the way a person breathes when they are holding back something enormous. "They called her Angel 6, Solomon said, "and they declared her dead when her helicopter finally went down." He took one more step closer, but the dogs never believed it. They've been waiting for her ever since. Outside the fence, the assembled handlers and officers exchanged confused looks. Angel 6 was a legend, a ghost story passed among special operations personnel. The pilot who had defied direct orders, defied impossible odds, defied death itself to save American lives. The memorial at Fort Bragg bore her name. The classified after-action reports credited her with the largest single-mission extraction in the history of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and according to every official record, she had been dead for 6 years. Fletcher was the first to act, his fingers flying across his tablet as he accessed databases deeper than any civilian should know existed. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "There's no connection between Willow Hayes and Angel 6. No connection at all unless..." His voice trailed off as classified files began populating his screen. Holy cow. What? Crystal demanded. What did you find? Fletcher looked up at Willow with an expression of dawning comprehension. She doesn't exist. Willow Hayes doesn't exist in any database before 2021. No birth certificate, no social security number, no driver's license, nothing. She's a completely manufactured identity. Manufactured by who? By people who wanted someone to disappear. Inside the compound, Solomon had not broken eye contact with Willow. You came back, he said simply. After everything. After the burns and the surgeries and the pain, you came back here. I made a promise. Willow's voice was steady, but something beneath it trembled. I told them I would come back. The dogs. They were trapped with us. When the helicopter went down the third time, when everything was burning, she paused, her hand finding Thor's head instinctively. They didn't leave. The handlers were wounded or worse, but the dogs stayed. They formed a perimeter around the survivors. They fought off enemy combatants until the rescue team arrived. Solomon nodded slowly. I remember. I was one of those survivors. I know. You saved my life. I was doing my job. Your job was supposed to get you killed. Willow's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. Clearly, I'm bad at following those kinds of orders. The exchange between them had been quiet, private, but the atmosphere in the kennel compound had shifted dramatically. Handlers who had been mocking Willow 10 minutes ago now stood in uncertain silence. The weight of revelation pressed down on everyone present. Logan Vance, who had been the most aggressive in his dismissal of the small civilian woman, found himself reviewing every interaction through a new lens. The way she had deflected his grab, the combat-trained reflexes, the absolute calm under pressure. He had assumed she was a fraud, but frauds did not move like that. Frauds did not stand like that. Frauds did not look at hostile environments the way she looked at this one. The dogs know her, he said, more to himself than anyone else. They actually know her. They should. Fletcher's voice was distant, still processing information on his tablet. According to this, she named most of them. Thor, Otis, Shadow, Viper, Ghost, Reaper. She designated them during the breeding program before they were assigned to handlers. That's impossible. The naming happened years ago. The naming happened in 2017 by a Night Stalker pilot attached to K9 Development. Call sign, Angel 6. The pieces were falling into place now, each one adding weight to a picture that should have been impossible. The mysterious connection, the dog's recognition, the calm expertise that had seemed so out of place on a woman with no official background. She's Angel 6, Crystal breathed. She's actually Angel 6. No. Brick's voice was sharp with denial. Angel 6 is dead. There's a memorial. There are official records. Records can be changed. Fletcher turned his tablet to show the assembled crowd. Look at this. Official status updated from KIA to classified in 2021. Someone changed her death certificate to a medical leave document. Someone gave her a new identity. Someone wanted her to disappear. Why would anyone want a hero to disappear? Because some heroes know things that aren't supposed to be known. Solomon had heard enough. He turned away from Willow, facing the assembled crowd with the authority of a man who had commanded special operations for longer than some of them had been alive. Everyone who isn't essential personnel, clear out, now. What you've seen here today is classified. What you think you understand is classified. If I hear a single word of this discussed outside official channels, careers will end. Are we clear? A chorus of "Yes, Master Chief" echoed through the compound. As people began to disperse, Hazel Monroe lingered at the fence. She caught Willow's eye and held up a hand in a small wave. My brother, she said quietly, he was at Kandahar. He talks about Angel 6 like she was a guardian angel, like she saved his soul, not just his life. Willow's expression softened slightly. What's his name? Marcus Monroe. A flash of recognition crossed Willow's face. Sergeant Monroe, he took shrapnel in the second extraction. I remember him. Hazel's eyes filled with tears. He's alive because of you. He's alive because he's a fighter. I just gave him a ride home. Jasper Monroe, the security guard who had first challenged Willow's presence, removed his hat and held it against his chest. Ma'am, he said simply, the single word carrying the weight of years of family gratitude. Willow nodded once, acknowledging the gesture without dwelling on it. She had not come here for recognition. She had not come here for thanks. She had come here for the 24 silent witnesses who now pressed against her legs, their bodies warm with life that she had helped preserve. "Master Chief," she said, turning back to Solomon, "I didn't come here to cause problems. I just wanted to see them again." "You've seen them." "I know." She looked down at Thor, whose intelligent eyes seemed to hold understanding far beyond canine capacity. "I should probably go." "And where would you go?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Willow Hayes had no official existence. The woman she had been before was legally dead. The woman she had become was a manufactured identity with no history, no connections, no place in the world. Except here, except with the dogs, who had never forgotten her. "I hadn't thought that far ahead," she admitted. "Then don't." Solomon made a decision. "These animals haven't responded to handlers properly since they got back from Kandahar. Every behavioral specialist we've brought in has failed. Every approach we've tried has fallen short. They've been waiting for something. Someone," Willow corrected quietly. "Someone," Solomon agreed. "They've been waiting for someone. And that someone just walked through our front gate." He reached out, offering his hand in a gesture that was part greeting, part truce, part acknowledgement of debts that could never be repaid. "Welcome to the canine facility, Miss Hayes. Consider yourself hired." Willow looked at his hand for a long moment, then she took it. Outside the fence, the remaining handlers and staff watched in silence as their world realigned around a new reality. The woman they had mocked, dismissed, challenged, and threatened was not a fraud or a wannabe or a delusional civilian playing at military games. She was a legend made flesh, and she had come home. But not everyone was ready to accept the new order of things. Brick Holloway stood apart from the others, his arms crossed, his face a mask of carefully contained conflict. He had built his career on being the best handler in the facility. He had trained dogs that had saved lives and taken them. He had earned every inch of his reputation through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. And now some broken pilot had walked in and stolen his dogs with nothing but her presence. "This isn't over," he muttered to himself. "Not by a long shot." The next 3 hours proceeded in a blur of activity that might have overwhelmed anyone less accustomed to chaos. Willow was processed through administrative channels that had never been designed for someone with a classified past and a manufactured present. Forms were filled out with information that might or might not have been accurate. Background checks returned results that contradicted each other in ways that made Fletcher's head hurt. Through it all, the dogs refused to let her out of their sight. When Willow moved to the administrative building, 24 Belgian Malinois pressed against kennel doors, whining and barking, until handlers released them into the exercise yard where they could at least see the building she had entered. When she emerged for a brief tour of the facility, they tracked her movement with the precision of trained surveillance teams. "I've never seen anything like it," one handler commented. "It's like they're afraid she'll disappear again." "Can you blame them?" another replied. "She did disappear once before." Logan Vance watched from a distance, his earlier aggression tempered by the revelations, but not entirely extinguished. He had been wrong about her, clearly, spectacularly wrong, but being wrong did not mean he had to like the new situation. "She's going to change everything," he said to Crystal, who had positioned herself nearby with the instincts of a career gossip sensing major developments. "Maybe everything needs to change." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one who's going to have to explain to command why the dogs listen to a civilian better than they listen to trained handlers." "She's not a civilian. She's a chief warrant officer. She's retired, medically discharged. She doesn't have rank anymore." Crystal tilted her head, studying Logan with the shrewd assessment of someone who had navigated military social hierarchies for years. "You're scared of her." "I'm not scared. You are. Not of what she can do to you physically. You're scared of what she represents." Crystal nodded toward the exercise yard, where Willow had finally joined the dogs who had been tracking her movements. She walked into fire to save people she had never met, 3 times, in one night. When everyone else said it was suicide, a small smile played at her lips. "What have you done that compares?" Logan did not answer. He could not answer, because the truth was nothing he had done compared. Nothing anyone at this facility had done compared. Angel 6 existed on a level of heroism that most people would never approach, and she had spent the last 6 years hiding from a world that thought she was dead. In the exercise yard, Willow sat on the ground while 24 military working dogs arranged themselves around her in a formation that looked almost rehearsed. Thor claimed the position directly at her side, his massive head resting on her thigh. The others formed concentric circles, each dog maintaining awareness of both Willow and the surrounding environment. "You've been protecting each other," she said quietly, understanding the formation for what it was. "All this time. You never stopped." Thor made a sound that might have been agreement. "I'm sorry I took so long to come back. I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner." Her voice caught slightly. Things were complicated. The word was inadequate for 6 years of surgeries, physical therapy, psychological evaluation, and identity reconstruction. Inadequate for the pain of being dead in every official sense while being very much alive in every practical one. Inadequate for the loneliness of existing in a world where no one knew your real name, your real history, your real sacrifices. But the dogs did not need words. They had their own language, built on scent and memory, and the unbreakable bonds forged in fire. They had recognized her the moment she walked through the gate. They had claimed her before any human had realized what was happening. They had been waiting. And now, the waiting was over. "Ma'am?" The voice came from behind her, tentative and uncertain. Willow turned to find Fletcher Dunn standing at the edge of the exercise yard, his tablet clutched against his chest like a shield. "I have some questions, if you have time." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that might get me in trouble for asking." He glanced around, ensuring no one was close enough to overhear. "I've been going through records, classified records, things I probably shouldn't have access to." "And what did you find?" "Inconsistencies." Fletcher moved closer, lowering his voice further. "Operation Crimson Dawn is listed as a successful extraction with minimal casualties. But the dog handler roster shows 13 handlers deployed and only 2 returned." He swallowed hard. 11 handlers died that night, but 24 dogs came back. Willow's expression did not change, but something in her eyes hardened. "What's your question?" "Who brought the dogs back? If the handlers were dead, who loaded them onto the helicopters? Who kept them calm during extraction? Who—" He trailed off, the implication of his own questions sinking in. "You already know the answer." "I know what I suspect. I want to know if I'm right." Willow was quiet for a long moment, her hand absently stroking Thor's head. "The third extraction. The one where my helicopter went down. We were overloaded, too many wounded, too many dogs. The aircraft was never designed to carry that much weight." She paused. "The handlers who were still alive were in bad shape, couldn't control their dogs, couldn't help with loading, couldn't do anything but bleed. So, you did it." "The dogs trusted me. We'd worked together during the breeding program. They knew my voice, my scent. When everything was chaos, they listened to me because I was familiar." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "They were more professional than most humans I've worked with." "And when the helicopter went down?" "They formed a perimeter, kept the enemy back while we waited for rescue." Willow's hand found the scar on Thor's shoulder. "Thor took 3 bullets protecting a wounded SEAL. He should have died. They all should have died. But they didn't." "Neither did you." "No." The word carried weight that Fletcher could not fully comprehend. "Neither did I." Fletcher stood in silence, processing information that challenged everything he thought he understood about that night. The official reports made no mention of a pilot loading dogs during extraction, made no mention of animals forming a defensive perimeter, made no mention of any of this. Why isn't any of this in the records? Because some stories are too complicated for official documentation. Willow looked up at him, her eyes holding secrets that would never be declassified. And some heroes don't fit into neat categories that bureaucrats can file away. The dogs. The dogs saved as many lives as any human that night. But they'll never get medals, never get recognition, never get anything except a kennel and a handler who may or may not understand what they've been through. Willow's voice hardened slightly. "That's why I came back. Not for thanks or recognition or whatever career opportunity Master Chief Crawford is offering. I came back because someone needs to remember what they did. Someone needs to honor the sacrifice they made." Fletcher nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "That's why they respond to you. They respond to me because I see them, not as military assets or working dogs or tools to be deployed. I see them as warriors who have earned the right to be treated with dignity." She looked around at the circle of dogs surrounding her. "They have been waiting for someone who understands. And now they don't have to wait anymore. A commotion at the edge of the exercise yard drew their attention. Brick Holloway was striding toward them, with purpose in his step and challenge in his eyes. Several other handlers followed in his wake, forming a loose group that felt more like a confrontation than a casual approach. Miss Hayes. Brick's use of the civilian title was deliberate, a reminder that whatever her past might have been, she held no official rank here. We need to discuss protocols. Willow rose smoothly to her feet, her movement triggering a response from the dogs. Thor stood as well, positioning himself slightly forward of her position. The others shifted, their formation adapting to the new threat assessment. What protocols would those be, Senior Chief? Handling protocols, training schedules, chain of command. Brick stopped 3 feet away, his posture aggressive but carefully controlled. Just because the Master Chief decided to hire you doesn't mean you get to walk in and take over. These are my dogs, my facility, my rules. I understand. Do you? Because it seems like you've spent the last 3 hours undermining everything we've built here. He gestured at the dogs surrounding her. They're supposed to respond to handlers, trained handlers, not whoever happens to wander in with the right smell. The dogs respond to trust, Senior Chief. Trust that has to be earned. I've earned their trust. I've spent years earning their trust. Have you? Willow's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. Because from what I've seen, they respond to your commands out of conditioning, not connection. There's a difference. The accusation hit Brick like a physical blow. His face reddened, his hands clenching at his sides. You don't know what you're talking about. I know these dogs. I know their history, their trauma, their unmet needs. They've been waiting for something that standard military protocols can't provide. Willow took a step forward, closing the distance between them. They've been waiting for someone who understands what they went through, what they lost, what they sacrificed. What they sacrificed? They're dogs. They don't understand sacrifice. It was the wrong thing to say. Thor growled, a low sound that vibrated through the air with unmistakable menace. The other dogs shifted, their postures changing from relaxed to alert in an instant. Tell that to Thor, Willow said quietly. He took 3 bullets protecting a wounded human. Tell that to Shadow, who lost her handler and still dragged his body to safety. Tell that to the 11 dogs in this yard who survived injuries that would have ended their careers if anyone had been paying attention to their medical needs. Brick opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. These animals gave everything, Willow continued. And in return, they got a kennel and a training schedule and handlers who see them as equipment instead of partners. Her voice softened slightly, losing some of its edge. I'm not here to take over, Senior Chief. I'm here to help them heal. If you want to be part of that, I'd welcome your expertise. But if you're going to stand there and tell me that dogs don't understand sacrifice, then you don't understand them nearly as well as you think you do. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft sounds of dogs breathing, waiting, watching the confrontation with intelligence that seemed almost human. Logan stepped forward from the group of handlers, his massive frame casting a shadow across the dusty ground. She's right. Brick turned, surprise evident in his expression. What? She's right. Logan moved to stand beside Willow, a position that felt significant in ways that transcended simple geography. I've been working with Odin for 2 years. He follows my commands, but there's always been something missing, something I couldn't reach no matter how many hours I put in. He looked at Willow with something approaching respect. 5 minutes with her, and he's more relaxed than I've ever seen him. That doesn't mean anything. It means something to him. Logan nodded toward the massive Belgian Malinois who had positioned himself at Willow's right side. Look at him, Brick. Really look at him. When's the last time you saw any of these dogs that calm? Brick looked. He did not want to see what Logan was showing him, but he looked anyway. The dogs were different. The constant low-level tension that had defined their behavior since returning from Kandahar was absent. They were still alert, still professional, still ready to respond to threats. But the edge that had made them difficult to handle, the trauma that had never quite healed, seemed somehow softened, all because of one woman. Fine, Brick said finally, the word pulled from him like a tooth extraction. You want to help them heal? Prove it. Show me what you can do that we can't. What did you have in mind? Combat readiness assessment, tomorrow morning, 0600 hours. Brick's jaw tightened. We run the dogs through standard evaluation protocols, aggression response, command compliance, stress tolerance. Everything by the book. If you're as good as you claim, the results should speak for themselves. And if the results are good, then maybe you've earned the right to an opinion about how we run things here. And if they're not, Brick smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Then you go back to wherever you came from, and we forget this ever happened. Willow considered the challenge for a long moment. Behind her, Thor made a sound that might have been encouragement or warning or both. Around her, 24 dogs waited for her decision with patience born of trust. 0600, she said finally. I'll be here. Brick nodded once sharply, then turned and walked away. The other handlers followed, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. They had all been shaken by the day's revelations, their understanding of the facility and its operations fundamentally altered by the arrival of a legend they had thought was dead. Tomorrow would determine whether that legend was fact or fiction. Fletcher lingered after the others had gone, his analytical mind clearly struggling with questions that demanded answers. Why did you agree to that? Because he needs it. He needs what? To understand. Willow watched Brick's retreating form with something this might have been sympathy. He's built his entire identity around being the best handler here, the expert, the authority, and now someone has walked in and shown him that expertise isn't everything. She turned back to Fletcher. That's threatening. It makes people defensive. Sometimes the only way through defensive walls is to meet them where they are. And if the assessment goes badly, it won't. How can you be sure? Willow looked down at Thor, who was watching her with unwavering attention. Because these dogs have been waiting 6 years for someone to believe in them, someone to see what they're capable of, someone to help them become what they were always meant to be. A small smile crossed her face. Tomorrow, they're going to show everyone exactly what that means. The sun was beginning to set over the K9 facility, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seemed almost too dramatic for reality. Willow remained in the exercise yard, surrounded by dogs who showed no inclination to leave her side, even as handlers called them for evening feeding. They're going to have to eat eventually, Crystal commented from her position at the fence. She had been watching for the past hour, her earlier mockery replaced by something closer to fascination. They'll eat when they're ready. You're different than I expected. Willow glanced up. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more aggressive, maybe? More in your face about who you are and what you've done. Crystal shrugged. Most heroes I've met can't wait to tell you about their heroism. Most people you've met aren't actually heroes. Fair point. Crystal was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Why did you really come back? Not the official reason. The real one. Willow was silent for a long time, her fingers absently tracing patterns in Thor's fur. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than Crystal had ever heard it. I died on that helicopter. Not legally, not medically, but in every way that mattered. She paused. The person I was before Kandahar stopped existing when the flames took her. The surgeries rebuilt my face. The therapy rebuilt my mind, but some things can't be reconstructed. What things? Purpose, connection, meaning. Willow looked up at the darkening sky. I spent 6 years being nobody, living under a fake name, working jobs that didn't matter, existing without really being alive. And the whole time I kept thinking about them, about the dogs, about whether they were okay, whether they remembered. And I finally realized that the only way to find out was to stop hiding. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. So I filled out a job application like any other civilian, drove across the country, and walked through the front gate of a military facility where I'm technically not supposed to exist. She shrugged. It's not the most elegant plan, but it worked. Crystal found herself unexpectedly moved by the simple honesty of the answer. You know tomorrow's assessment is going to be brutal, right? Brick doesn't play fair when his ego is on the line. I know. And you're still going to go through with it? I don't have a choice. Willow stood, her movement triggering a ripple of response through the surrounding dogs. These dogs have been waiting long enough. Tomorrow, one way or another, the waiting ends. Night fell over the K9 facility with the gradual inevitability of military routine. Handlers completed their evening rounds. Dogs were fed, watered, and secured in their kennels. The administrative building went dark as staff headed home to families and responsibilities that existed outside the fence. Willow remained in the exercise yard, She had been offered quarters in the visiting personnel building, a small room with a bed and a bathroom, and nothing that felt like home. She had declined politely, explaining that she preferred to stay with the dogs for their first night together in 6 years. No one had argued with her. Now she sat in the darkness, surrounded by animals who had chosen her over comfortable kennels and regular meals. They had arranged themselves in the same protective formation as before, their bodies creating a living barrier between her and the world. "You're going to get me in trouble," she murmured to Thor, who had pressed himself against her side with unmovable determination. "They're going to say I'm undermining training protocols, encouraging bad behavior." Thor made a sound that conveyed supreme indifference to the opinions of humans who were not Willow. "I missed you too, boy." The stars emerged one by one, a scattering of light across the Virginia sky that reminded Willow of different nights under different skies. Kandahar, the mountains, the sound of rotors and gunfire, and dogs howling in defiance of death itself. She had tried not to think about that night for 6 years, had buried the memories under layers of pain medication and psychological counseling and the deliberate construction of a new identity. But being here, surrounded by the survivors, brought everything rushing back with a clarity that was almost unbearable. The first extraction had been textbook perfect. 17 SEALs, 6 dogs, loaded and airborne before the enemy could mount an effective response. The second extraction had been harder. Anti-aircraft fire had increased, the Taliban recognizing the pattern and positioning assets to counter it. Willow had taken hits to her fuselage that should have forced her to abort. She had kept flying anyway. The third extraction had been impossible. By then, the enemy knew exactly where she would be and when. They had concentrated everything they had on that single point, creating a kill zone that no aircraft should have survived. Command had ordered her to stand down, to wait for ground forces, to let the remaining SEALs and dogs take their chances until morning brought air support. She had ignored the order. She had ignored it because she could hear them on the radio. The SEALs calling out coordinates, begging for extraction, their voices growing weaker as ammunition ran low and casualties mounted. And beneath their voices, she could hear the dogs, howling, fighting, refusing to leave their handlers even as the handlers died around them. She had flown into that kill zone knowing she would probably never fly out. She had been right. The helicopter had taken catastrophic damage on approach. Engine fire, control system failure. Emergency procedures that existed only in training manuals, written by people who had never actually faced what she was facing. She had somehow landed the burning aircraft, somehow gotten the survivors loaded, somehow lifted off one final time. And then gravity and physics and the accumulated damage of 3 impossible missions had finally caught up with her. The crash had killed her co-pilot instantly, had killed 3 of the SEALs she was trying to rescue, had ignited fuel that turned the wreckage into an inferno that consumed everything it touched, including her. Willow reached up unconsciously, her fingers tracing the scars that mapped her neck and shoulder. The burns had been extensive, 3rd degree, deep enough to require years of skin grafts and reconstruction, deep enough to change her face into something her own mother would not recognize, deep enough to give her a new identity without trying. "I should be dead," she whispered to the dogs who surrounded her. "By every reasonable measure, I should be dead, but I'm not, and for a long time, I couldn't figure out why." Thor lifted his head, his dark eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that seemed to demand an answer. "I think I came back for you," she said softly. "I think that's why I survived when I shouldn't have, because there was something left to do, someone left to protect." She did not know if the words were true. She did not know if anything she believed about her survival made sense. But surrounded by 24 dogs who had waited 6 years for her return, she found that truth mattered less than faith, and she had faith in them. The night deepened around them, and eventually, exhaustion claimed what anxiety could not defeat. Willow slept surrounded by warm bodies and watchful eyes, protected by warriors who had never stopped believing she would come home. Quick pause here. If you're enjoying this story, do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We release stories like this every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when the military dogs make their choice. Also, drop a comment below. Have you ever seen an animal recognize someone before humans did? I read every single comment. Now, let's see what happens when Willow enters the kennel. 0530 came with the gray light of pre-dawn and the sharp sound of boots on gravel. Willow was already awake, had been awake for an hour, running through scenarios in her mind while the dogs dozed around her. She had heard the facility begin to stir, handlers arriving for early shifts, equipment being prepared, vehicles moving into position for the day's activities. The assessment was coming. "You ready for this?" she asked Thor, who had risen the moment she stirred. Thor's response was a steady gaze that conveyed confidence without words. "Yeah, me too." She stood, stretching muscles that had stiffened from a night on the ground, and began the process of preparing for what was to come. The dogs rose with her, shaking off sleep and arranging themselves in the formation that had become instinctive over the past 24 hours. At precisely 0600, Brick Holloway appeared at the edge of the exercise yard with an entourage that spoke to the seriousness of the occasion. Lieutenant Commander Cyrus Dalton stood at his shoulder, representing official authority. Fletcher Dunn held his ever-present tablet, prepared to document everything for the record. Logan Vance and 3 other handlers formed a semicircle behind them, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. Master Chief Solomon Crawford had positioned himself slightly apart from the group, his presence neither endorsing nor opposing what was about to happen. He would observe, he would judge, but he would not interfere unless the situation demanded it. "Ms. Hayes," Brick's voice carried the formal weight of official proceedings. "Are you prepared to demonstrate your handling capabilities under standard assessment protocols?" Willow stepped forward, her movement triggering a response from the dogs. They flowed around her like water, maintaining formation while adapting to her changing position. "Ready when you are, Senior Chief." "Then let's begin." Brick consulted a clipboard, though Willow suspected he had the assessment memorized. "First evaluation, basic command compliance. You will direct 3 dogs through a series of standard commands without physical contact. We'll use Thor, Shadow, and Viper." The choice was deliberate. Thor was the alpha, the most dominant and difficult to control. Shadow was the most traumatized, having lost her handler in Kandahar. Viper was the most aggressive, known for unpredictable responses to stress. 3 dogs designed to fail. Understood, Willow did not argue with the selection. Thor, Shadow, Viper, forward. The 3 dogs separated from the pack with liquid grace, positioning themselves in front of Willow with military precision. Their attention was absolute, their focus unwavering. Brick began calling commands from his clipboard. "Sit. Sit," Willow repeated, her voice calm and even. 3 dogs sat simultaneously. "Down. Down." 3 dogs lowered themselves to the ground. "Stay." Willow gave the command, then turned and walked 20 feet away from the dogs. She stopped, her back to them, waiting. The dogs did not move. 10 seconds passed. 20, 30. Brick watched with narrowed eyes, waiting for the discipline to break, waiting for trauma or instinct to override training. The dogs remained motionless. "Return," Brick finally called. "Return!" 3 dogs rose and flowed back to Willow's side in a single coordinated movement. The watching handlers exchanged glances. Standard protocol required 30 seconds of stay compliance. The dogs had held for over 45, with Willow not even looking at them. "Acceptable," Brick said, his voice betraying nothing. Second evaluation, aggression response. The dogs will be presented with threatening stimuli while you maintain control. Handler Vance will serve as the aggressor. Logan stepped forward, pulling on a bite sleeve that covered his arm from wrist to shoulder. The protective equipment was designed to withstand the force of a military working dog's jaws, though the experience of wearing it while being attacked was never pleasant. "We'll start with Thor," Brick continued. "Standard aggression protocol, command to attack, command to release, 30-second maximum engagement." This was where things would get interesting. Thor's aggression responses had been unpredictable since Kandahar. He had a tendency to escalate beyond command parameters, to lose himself in the violence once it started. Several handlers had been injured trying to control him in similar assessments. "Ready?" Willow asked Logan. "Ready as I'll ever be." She took a breath, centering herself. "Thor, guard." Thor's posture shifted instantly, his body lowering slightly, his eyes locking onto Logan with predatory focus. The transformation was dramatic, from relaxed companion to lethal weapon in the space of a heartbeat. "Thor, take down." The dog launched himself at Logan with explosive speed, closing the 20-foot gap in less than 2 seconds. His jaws clamped onto the bite sleeve, with enough force to drive Logan back several steps, despite the handler's considerable size. "Release." Thor opened his jaws immediately, backing away from Logan and returning to guard position. No escalation, no loss of control, perfect compliance. Logan stared at the dog in disbelief. That's not possible. He's never released that cleanly. Ever. Continue the assessment, Brick ordered, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Shadow was next. The female Belgian Malinois had been the most problematic of the group since Kandahar, her trauma manifesting in unpredictable fear responses that could shift to aggression without warning. Shadow, guard. The dog moved into position, but Willow could see the tension in her body, the remnants of trauma that had never been properly addressed. She modified her approach slightly, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. It's okay, girl. I've got you. Nothing bad is going to happen. We're just playing a game. The words were not standard protocol, but they were exactly what Shadow needed to hear. Take down. Shadow's attack was textbook perfect. Her release was immediate. Her return to guard position was so precise that Fletcher started taking notes on his tablet. How did you do that? One of the handlers whispered to no one in particular. Viper was last, the most aggressive dog in the facility, named for his tendency to strike without warning and to hold on long after the command to release. He had been scheduled for behavioral euthanasia twice, saved only by his exceptional skills in detection and tracking. Viper, guard. The dog's response was immediate and intense, his body vibrating with barely contained violence. This was an animal who had been pushed to his limits and beyond, whose trauma had calcified into something that looked like aggression but was actually desperation. Willow understood that desperation, had lived it, had survived it. Viper. Her voice was softer still, carrying a quality that seemed to bypass training and speak directly to something deeper. You don't have to prove anything. Not to them, not to anyone. Just do what you know how to do and then come back to me. The dog's vibration decreased slightly. His focus remained intense, but the quality of it changed. Less desperate, more professional. Take down. Viper's attack was clean and efficient. His hold on the bite sleeve was powerful but controlled. When Willow gave the release command, he let go immediately, returning to her side with a precision that made Brick's jaw drop. 30-second assessment complete, Fletcher announced. All 3 dogs performed within acceptable parameters. Viper showed the cleanest response he's ever registered. The watching handlers broke into murmured conversation, their skepticism eroding in the face of undeniable evidence. Whatever Willow was doing, however she was doing it, the results spoke for themselves. Brick stared at the 3 dogs who had just performed flawlessly under the handler he had designed the assessment to defeat. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions, disbelief, frustration, and something that might have been the first stirrings of respect. Third evaluation, he said finally, stress tolerance. The dogs will be exposed to simulated combat conditions while maintaining command compliance. This was the hardest test, the one that revealed whether a handler could maintain control when everything was chaos. Simulated combat meant loud noises, flashing lights, smoke, and the kind of environmental stimulation that triggered flashbacks in traumatized animals. It was also the test most likely to result in injury. All 24 dogs will participate simultaneously, Brick continued. You will maintain formation and command compliance while the simulation runs for 5 minutes. That's not standard protocol, Solomon spoke for the first time. Standard stress tolerance uses individual dogs, not the entire pack. Miss Hayes claims she has a special connection with these animals. Let's see how special that connection really is. Brick's smile held no warmth. Unless she wants to withdraw, Willow looked at the dogs surrounding her, at the 24 warriors who had waited 6 years for her return. Let's do it. The simulation began with the sharp crack of simulated gunfire. Speakers positioned around the exercise yard pumping out the sounds of combat at volume levels designed to overwhelm. Strobe lights flickered, casting chaotic shadows across the ground. Smoke machines pumped artificial fog that reduced visibility to 10 feet. The dogs reacted instantly, their bodies tensing, their training kicking in. Several of them showed signs of stress response, lowered ears, raised hackles, the beginnings of panic that could escalate into aggression or flight. Willow did not try to shout commands over the noise. She did not try to physically control dogs who were spinning toward chaos. Instead, she dropped to one knee, placed her hands palm down on the ground, and began to breathe. Deep, slow breaths, the kind of breathing that soldiers learned to control heart rate during combat, the kind of breathing that dogs could sense and respond to instinctively. With me, she said, though the words were barely audible over the cacophony. "All of you, with me." The dogs began to move, not away from her, not toward the sources of perceived threat, but toward her. They flowed through the smoke and strobing lights like shadows, positioning themselves around her in the protective formation that had become their default response to uncertainty. "Circle up. Hold." 24 dogs arranged themselves in concentric rings, their bodies forming a barrier between their pack leader and the chaos surrounding them. They trembled with stress, their instincts screaming at them to fight or flee, but they held position, because she asked them to, because they trusted her. The simulation continued for the full few minutes, an eternity of noise and light and smoke, designed to break the strongest bonds between handler and dog. When it finally ended, the sudden silence felt almost as disorienting as the chaos that had preceded it. Willow rose slowly to her feet, surrounded by 24 dogs who had just demonstrated a level of control that none of the watching handlers had ever witnessed. "Assessment complete," Fletcher announced, his voice slightly awed. "All dogs maintained formation throughout the simulation. 0 breaks in command compliance, 0 aggressive incidents, 0 attempts to flee." Brick stood frozen, his clipboard forgotten in his hand. He had designed this assessment to fail, had chosen the most traumatized dogs, the most difficult scenarios, the most extreme conditions. And Willow had passed every test with a level of competence that made his own handling skills look amateurish. How? The word escaped him before he could stop it. Willow looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. "They're not equipment, Senior Chief. They're partners. They've been through trauma that would break most humans, and they've never had anyone help them process it. All they needed was someone who understood what they were carrying. And you understand?" "Better than anyone." Solomon Crawford stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "I've seen enough. The assessment results are clear. Miss Hayes has demonstrated exceptional handling capabilities under conditions designed to ensure failure." He turned to Brick. "Any objections, Senior Chief?" Brick was silent for a long moment. His face cycled through emotions: anger, frustration, wounded pride, and finally something like acceptance. "No, Master Chief, no objections." "Good." Solomon turned to Willow. "Welcome to the K9 facility officially, Miss Hayes. As of now, you're our new behavioral rehabilitation specialist. Your primary responsibility will be these 24 dogs and whatever treatment protocols you deem appropriate." He paused. "Do you accept the position?" Willow looked at the dogs surrounding her, at the trust in their eyes, at the hope that had been rekindled after 6 years of waiting. "I accept." The handlers who had come to witness her failure now stood in uncertain clusters, their worldviews fundamentally altered by what they had seen. Crystal Marsh was recording on her phone, already composing the message she would send to colleagues at other facilities. Logan Vance had removed his bite sleeve and was approaching Thor with something approaching respect. Fletcher Dunn was still taking notes, his tablet filled with observations that would eventually make their way into training manuals and protocol updates. And Brick Holloway stood alone, watching the woman who had just dismantled everything he thought he knew about military working dogs. "Senior Chief," Willow's voice drew his attention. "I meant what I said yesterday. I'm not here to take over. I'm here to help them heal, and I could use your expertise." It was an olive branch, an offer of partnership instead of competition, a chance to be part of something instead of opposing it. Brick looked at the dogs who had chosen her over their trained handlers, looked at the calm they displayed in her presence, the trust they extended without hesitation, looked at his own career, built on controlling animals who had never really trusted him. "What would you need from me? Your knowledge of their individual histories, your observations about their behavior since Kandahar, your willingness to try new approaches when old ones aren't working." Willow extended her hand. "Partnership, Senior Chief, not competition." Brick stared at her hand for a long moment, then slowly he reached out and took it. "All right, Miss Hayes, partnership." A ripple of relief seemed to pass through the assembled handlers. The tension that had dominated the facility since Willow's arrival began to dissipate, replaced by something that felt like possibility. The assessment was over, but the real work was just beginning. Over the following hours, Willow began the process of properly integrating into the facility's operations. She met with each handler individually, learning their names, their roles, their relationships with specific dogs. She reviewed medical records, training logs, and behavioral assessments that painted a picture of trauma inadequately addressed and potential unfulfilled. The dogs followed her everywhere, refusing to be separated from their returned leader, even when handlers attempted to resume normal routines. Eventually, Solomon authorized a temporary modification to standard protocols, allowing Willow to maintain proximity to the pack until more permanent arrangements could be made. "This is going to require some adjustment," Cyrus Dalton commented, watching Willow walk through the facility with 24 dogs in formation behind her. "Good adjustment or bad adjustment?" Crystal asked. "Time will tell." Lunch came and went, meals eaten standing up, while discussions continued about treatment plans and training modifications. Willow answered questions with patience and technical expertise that surprised handlers who had expected emotional appeals rather than practical solutions. "The key is recognizing that trauma responses in dogs work differently than humans," she explained during an impromptu seminar in the exercise yard. "They don't rationalize their experiences. They don't construct narratives that help them make sense of what happened. They simply carry the weight until someone helps them put it down." "And how do you help them put it down?" Logan asked. "By giving them experiences that override the traumatic memories. Not by avoiding triggers, but by teaching them that triggers can lead to positive outcomes. It's slow work, requires consistency and patience." She smiled slightly. "And it requires handlers who see them as more than equipment." The afternoon brought a visitor that surprised everyone. A black sedan pulled into the facility's parking area, its government plates and tinted windows announcing importance before anyone emerged. Solomon moved to intercept, his posture shifting from relaxed observation to alert attention. The rear door opened, and a figure stepped out that made every military person present instinctively straighten. Admiral Theodore Richardson, SOCOM Command. 3 stars that represented authority over every special operations unit in the military. A face that had appeared in classified briefings and secure communications for decades. "Master Chief Crawford," the Admiral's voice carried across the distance with practiced command. "I received an interesting report this morning. Something about a ghost walking into a canine facility and taking command of an entire pack of military working dogs." Solomon saluted. "Sir, the report would be accurate." "Then I'd like to meet this ghost." The Admiral walked into the facility like he owned it, because in a very real sense, he did. Every special operations asset, every piece of equipment, every person in uniform answered ultimately to his authority, including the woman who had been dead for 6 years. Willow watched him approach from her position in the exercise yard. The dogs had arranged themselves around her in their standard formation, though their postures suggested wariness rather than hostility. "Miss Hayes?" The Admiral stopped at a respectful distance, studying her with eyes that had assessed threats across multiple continents. "Or should I say, Chief Warrant Officer Hayes?" "I don't hold rank anymore, sir. Medically retired." "So the paperwork claims." He nodded toward the dogs surrounding her. "Impressive. I've read the assessment results. Never seen anything like it. They're exceptional animals, sir. They are, and apparently they're also exceptional judges of character." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "I've been looking for you for 4 years, Miss Hayes, ever since we discovered that your death certificate had been altered to a medical discharge." "Someone wanted me to disappear, sir. I've never been entirely certain who." "Neither have we, which is one of the reasons I'm here." He gestured toward the administrative building. "I'd like to discuss your future. If you're amenable, we have resources, opportunities, the kind of positions that don't officially exist for people whose capabilities match yours." Willow looked at the dogs, at Thor, who pressed closer at the mention of her leaving. "With respect, Admiral, I didn't come back for a career opportunity. I came back for them." "I understand, and I'm not asking you to leave them." The Admiral's voice held genuine warmth. "I'm asking you to help us help them, and others like them. The K9 programs across all branches have been struggling since Kandahar. We need someone who understands the human-animal bond at the level you clearly do." "What exactly are you proposing? A new initiative? Canine behavioral rehabilitation across special operations? You would design the protocols, train the trainers, establish standards that actually address trauma instead of just managing it." He paused. "The dogs in this facility would be your first clients, and you would have complete authority over their treatment." It was an offer that would have been impossible to refuse for anyone who cared about military working dogs. Resources, authority, and the chance to make lasting change in how the military treated its 4-legged warriors. Willow looked at Thor. The dog looked back with eyes that seemed to understand exactly what was being offered. "I'll need time to consider it, sir." "Of course. Take whatever time you need." The Admiral reached into his pocket and produced a card. "My direct line. When you're ready to discuss specifics, call, day or night." He turned and walked back toward his waiting sedan, leaving behind an offer that could reshape Willow's entire future, and a past that was not yet finished revealing its secrets. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity and adjustment. Handlers who had been skeptical in the morning were now actively seeking Willow's input on their dog's behavioral issues. Equipment was requisitioned. Schedules were modified. The entire facility seemed to be realigning itself around the new reality of her presence. Through it all, the dogs remained with her. Their trust had not wavered. Their faith had not been misplaced. Evening came, painting the sky in shades of amber and purple that seemed too beautiful for a place that trained instruments of war. Willow sat in the exercise yard, surrounded by her pack, watching the sun set over a facility that was beginning to feel like something other than a temporary stop. "Ma'am?" Hazel Monroe appeared at the edge of the yard, carrying 2 bottles of water and a sandwich wrapped in paper. "Thought you might be hungry. You haven't eaten since this morning." Willow accepted the food with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Hazel. You didn't have to do that." "Actually, I did." Hazel sat down nearby, close enough for conversation, but far enough to respect boundaries. "My brother Marcus got back from his 3rd deployment last month. He's been having trouble adjusting, can't sleep, jumps at loud noises, drinks too much when he thinks no one's watching." "I'm sorry to hear that. The thing is, ever since he heard you were here, he's been different, better." Hazel's eyes glistened in the fading light. "He called me this morning, first time in weeks. Said he wanted to come visit the facility, said he wanted to meet the woman who saved his life." "I was just doing my job, Hazel." "No, you were doing something more than a job." Hazel leaned forward with intensity. "I've been around military families my whole life. I know the difference between duty and sacrifice. What you did that night, flying into fire 3 times when everyone told you to stand down, that wasn't duty. That was something else entirely." Willow was quiet for a long moment, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. "I hear them sometimes, at night, in my dreams. The voices on the radio, calling for extraction, the dogs, howling, the sound of bullets hitting the fuselage." She paused. "I couldn't save everyone. No matter how many times I went back, there were always more, always someone else who needed help. You saved 47 SEALs, 24 dogs. Everyone who was still alive when you made that first approach. I also lost 11 handlers, 3 SEALs in the final crash, my co-pilot." Willow's voice grew distant. "Sometimes the math doesn't add up. Sometimes saving lives still means watching others die. But you kept going back. Yes. Why?" The question hung in the air between them, simple and impossible at the same time. Why does anyone choose certain death for uncertain reward? Why does anyone fly into fire when every instinct screams retreat? Why does anyone sacrifice everything for people they have never met? "Because they were waiting for me," Willow finally said. "The SEALs, the dogs, they were trapped in hell, and they were waiting for someone to come get them. And I was the only one left who could." She looked at Thor, who had rested his head on her thigh during the conversation. "I made them a promise that night, when everything was burning and it looked like none of us were going to survive. I promised them I would come back, that I would find them again, no matter how long it took." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "It took 6 years, but I kept my word." Hazel wiped tears from her eyes. "That's why they trust you. That's why they wouldn't leave you yesterday, no matter what the handlers ordered. They remember. Dogs have longer memories than people give them credit for. Apparently so do pilots." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the facility. The dogs had dozed off one by one, their bodies warm against Willow's legs and back and sides. Thor remained awake, his eyes reflecting the emerging stars with something that looked almost human. "Ma'am?" Hazel's voice was soft, hesitant. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." "The Admiral's offer. Are you going to take it?" Willow considered the question. The answer should have been simple. A chance to shape policy, to help dogs across all branches, to turn her experience into something that could benefit thousands of animals and their handlers. But nothing about her life had been simple for 6 years. "I don't know yet," she admitted. Part of me wants to stay here, be with them, build something small and meaningful instead of big and bureaucratic, she sighed. And part of me knows that staying small means leaving others to suffer. Other dogs who need help, other handlers who don't understand trauma, other programs that are failing because no one is willing to try something different. That sounds like a hard choice. Most real choices are. Hazel stood, brushing grass from her clothes. For what it's worth, I think you'll make the right decision, whatever that ends up being. How can you be so sure? Because you've already made harder decisions than this, and you're still here, Hazel smiled. Good night, ma'am. I'll see you tomorrow. She walked away, leaving Willow alone with her thoughts and her dogs. The night deepened. Stars emerged in patterns that Willow had learned to navigate by during countless night flights. She traced familiar constellations, remembering missions and deployments and the faces of people who had trusted her to bring them home. Thor stirred against her side, his massive head lifting to scan the darkness. A moment later, his tail began to wag slowly, recognizing something or someone approaching from the direction of the kennels. Solomon Crawford emerged from the shadows, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He settled onto the ground nearby with the careful grace of a man whose body had accumulated decades of damage but refused to admit defeat. Can't sleep either? Willow shook her head. Too much processing to do. I understand. Solomon was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about Kandahar, about that night. There's something I never got the chance to say to you. What's that? Thank you. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of suppressed gratitude. I was one of the first ones you pulled out, first extraction. I wanted to stay, to help with the others, but my injuries were too severe. You ordered me onto the helicopter, and I was too weak to argue. I remember. I watched you fly away, knowing you were going back into that fire, knowing the odds, knowing what you were risking. Solomon's voice roughened. And then I watched your helicopter go down on the third pass, watched it burn, watched the memorial service where they gave you 3 posthumous medals and talked about your sacrifice. I'm sorry you had to watch that. I'm not. He turned to face her directly. I'm grateful. Because for 6 years, I believed you were dead. I carried that guilt, that debt, that burden of being alive because someone else gave everything. And now, he gestured at her, at the dogs, at the facility around them. Now you're here, alive, still saving things that need saving. Willow did not know what to say. The weight of his gratitude pressed against her like a physical force, demanding acknowledgement she was not sure how to give. The dogs kept me going, she finally said, when everything else was lost, when I didn't know who I was anymore. I kept thinking about them, wondering if they were okay, hoping someone was taking care of them. She looked at Thor. They're the reason I survived the burns, the surgeries, the years of hiding. I needed to come back for them. I needed to keep my promise. Solomon nodded slowly. And now you have. Now I have. They sat in silence, 2 survivors of the same night, both carrying scars that would never fully heal. The dogs had arranged themselves in loose formation around them, accepting Solomon into their circle with the trust of warriors recognizing a fellow veteran. The Admiral's offer, Solomon said eventually. It's a good opportunity. I know. But you're hesitating. I'm considering. What's holding you back? Willow thought about the question. Really thought, examining the knot of emotion and logic that had been forming since Richardson made his proposal. Fear, maybe. The last time I took on something bigger than myself, it almost killed me. Did kill me, officially. She shook her head. I spent 6 years learning how to be small, how to be invisible, how to exist without mattering. The Admiral is asking me to matter again, to be visible, to take responsibility for things I might fail at. And that scares you? Everything scares me now, Master Chief. I've just gotten better at hiding it. Solomon's laugh was soft, understanding. You know what I've learned in 30 years of special operations? Fear is not the enemy. Fear is information. It tells you something is important. Something has stakes. Something matters. And what do you do with that information? You let it guide you, not control you, guide you. He turned to face her directly. Those dogs were afraid when you showed up. I could see it in their body language. Fear of disappointment, fear of being abandoned again. But they pushed through it because they wanted something more than they feared something. Connection, trust, belonging, the things that make fear worth facing. Solomon stood, his joints protesting audibly. The Admiral's offer is going to be there tomorrow, and the next day. You don't have to decide tonight, but don't let fear make the decision for you. He walked back toward the administrative building, leaving Willow alone with thoughts that were slowly beginning to align. Thor lifted his head, pressing his nose against her palm in a gesture that felt like encouragement. "You think I should do it, don't you, boy?" Thor's response was a soft whine and a tail wag that could have meant anything. "Yeah, I think maybe you're right." The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the small dramas playing out beneath them. Willow sat among her dogs, contemplating futures that had not existed 48 hours ago, thinking about fear and connection and the weight of choices that would shape lives beyond her own. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, did not know if she would accept the Admiral's offer or choose a smaller path, did not know what challenges waited in the shadows, what enemies might emerge from a past that refused to stay buried. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, she would not face it alone. 24 dogs had made that clear. They had chosen her, waited for her, trusted her with a faith that transcended language and species, and she would honor that trust, no matter what it cost. The night continued its slow rotation toward dawn. Willow dozed eventually, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Around her, the dogs maintained their vigil, watching over their returned leader with attention that never wavered. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the facility's fences, a phone rang in a room that did not officially exist. A woman's voice answered, sharp with urgency despite the late hour. "Angel 6 has surfaced. Virginia Beach, K9 facility." A pause. Then a response that carried implications Willow could not yet imagine. "Activate Phoenix Protocol. We have unfinished business with the woman who was supposed to stay dead." The line went silent, and in the exercise yard of Naval Special Warfare K9 training facility, surrounded by dogs who would die to protect her, Willow Hayes slept peacefully for the first time in 6 years. Unaware that her resurrection had just triggered events that would make Kandahar look like a training exercise. Dawn arrived with the soft gray light that precedes sunrise, painting the K9 facility in shades of silver and shadow. Willow woke to the sensation of warm breath against her cheek, Thor's massive head positioned inches from her face, his eyes already alert and watchful. "Good morning to you too," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. The other dogs stirred around her, stretching and yawning with the casual grace of predators who knew no immediate threat existed. Their formation had loosened during the night, bodies sprawled in comfortable proximity rather than tactical arrangement. Willow rose slowly, her muscles protesting the second consecutive night spent on the ground. She was getting too old for this, her body reminded her. The burns and surgeries had accelerated the aging process in ways that doctors warned her about, but could not prevent. The facility was already coming to life around her. Handlers moved between buildings with purpose, their morning routines proceeding with military precision. The smell of coffee drifted from the canteen, mixing with the earthy scent of dogs and the salt tang of the nearby ocean. "Miss Hayes!" Fletcher Dunn appeared at the edge of the exercise yard, his ever-present tablet clutched against his chest. "Master Chief Crawford asked me to inform you that breakfast is available in the main building. And..." He hesitated, something flickering across his face. "There's been a development you should know about." "What kind of development?" "The video from yesterday's assessment. Someone uploaded it to social media last night. It's gone viral." Willow felt her stomach drop. Visibility was the last thing she needed, the last thing she wanted. How viral? 3 million views as of 20 minutes ago, and climbing. Fletcher's expression was apologetic. "The comments are intense. People want to know who you are, what you did, why the dogs responded to you like that. 6 years of careful anonymity, unraveling in the span of a single night." Willow closed her eyes, processing the implications. "Who uploaded it?" "We're still investigating. The account is anonymous, but the video quality suggests it came from inside the facility." Fletcher lowered his voice. "Master Chief is conducting interviews. Several people had phones recording during the assessment. Crystal Marsh." The thought came unbidden, but certain. Crystal had been recording everything, her phone capturing moments that were never meant to leave the facility. "I need to see the video." Fletcher handed over his tablet, the screen already showing the social media post. Willow watched herself walk through the kennel compound, watched Thor bow before her, watched 24 dogs abandon their training to cluster around a woman who should have been a stranger. The comments section was a mixture of awe, skepticism, and desperate curiosity. Who is this woman? Is this real? Those dogs act like they know her. This has to be staged. Someone identify her, please. The algorithm is pushing it hard, Fletcher explained. News outlets are starting to pick it up. We've had 3 requests for interviews in the last hour. Deny them all. Already done. But ma'am, he hesitated again. People are going to keep digging. Your manufactured identity might hold up to casual scrutiny, but if someone with resources decides to investigate, the sentence did not need finishing. Willow understood the implications perfectly. Her carefully constructed anonymity was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to rebuild it. Where's Master Chief Crawford? Conference room. He's on a call with Admiral Richardson. Of course he was. The Admiral would have seen the video by now, would be calculating implications, managing fallout, deciding how to handle a situation that had spiraled beyond anyone's control. Willow made her way to the main building, the dogs flowing around her in their protective formation. Handlers stopped and stared as she passed, their expressions a mixture of respect and uncertainty. The video had changed things, had made her real in ways that yesterday's assessment had not. She found Solomon in the conference room, his phone pressed to his ear, his face carved in lines of tension. He looked up as she entered, held up a finger requesting patience, and continued his conversation. Yes, sir. I understand the concerns. We're implementing media blackout protocols now. No, sir. We haven't identified the source yet. Yes, sir. I'll inform her. He ended the call and sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 58 years. The video. I've seen it. Admiral Richardson is concerned, not about you specifically, but about the attention. The K9 program has always operated with minimal public visibility. This kind of exposure creates complications. I didn't ask for exposure. I know, but it's here now, and we have to deal with it. Solomon rubbed his eyes with the weariness of a man who had dealt with too many complications over too many years. The Admiral still wants you for the rehabilitation initiative. More than ever, actually. He thinks your story, properly managed, could help the program rather than hurt it. My story is classified. Parts of it could be declassified. The heroic parts, the parts that make for good press. Solomon's voice held a note of distaste. You'd become a public figure. Interviews, appearances, the face of military working dog programs across all branches. The prospect was nauseating. Willow had spent 6 years avoiding exactly this kind of visibility, building a life that existed in shadows and silence. The idea of stepping into spotlights, of becoming a symbol instead of a person, felt like a betrayal of everything she had sacrificed. And if I refuse, then we bury it, deny everything. Let the speculation die down naturally. Solomon met her eyes. But ma'am, I have to be honest with you. The people who wanted you to stay dead, whoever they are, they're going to see that video too. If they have resources, if they have reach, hiding becomes much harder when 3 million people are trying to find out who you are. The warning landed with the weight of truth. Willow had always known that her anonymity was borrowed time. Had always suspected that eventually, someone would come looking for the woman who was supposed to have died in a burning helicopter. She just had not expected eventually to arrive so quickly. I need time to think. Take what you need, but understand that decisions are being made with or without your input. Admiral Richardson is fielding calls from congressional oversight. The Secretary of Defense wants a briefing. People with stars on their collars are asking questions that require answers. Willow nodded, her mind already racing through possibilities and contingencies. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Master Chief, the people who wanted me dead, do you know who they are? Solomon's expression flickered with something she could not quite identify. I have suspicions. Nothing concrete, but if you're asking whether I think the danger is real, he paused. Yes, I think someone went to considerable trouble to make you disappear, and I think they're not going to be happy that you've reappeared. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that neither of them fully understood. Willow left the conference room and walked outside, needing air and space, and the grounding presence of the dogs who waited for her. They surrounded her immediately, pressing close with the instinctive understanding that something was wrong. We might have a problem, boys, she murmured to Thor, a bigger problem than expected. Thor's response was a low whine and a press of his head against her hip. Whatever came next, he seemed to say, they would face it together. The morning proceeded in a blur of conversations and consultations. Brick Holloway approached her with tentative suggestions about training protocol modifications. Logan Vance asked questions about behavioral assessment techniques with genuine curiosity rather than hostile skepticism. Crystal Marsh, conspicuously avoiding eye contact, hurried past without acknowledging anyone. Willow noted the avoidance but said nothing. Confrontation about the video leak could wait until more pressing matters were resolved. By mid-morning, the facility had attracted visitors. Veterans who had heard about the video, who had served in Kandahar or knew someone who had, began appearing at the gate. Some wanted to meet the legendary Angel 6. Others wanted to thank her for saving brothers and sisters in arms. A few simply stood at the fence, watching, as if her presence confirmed something they had always hoped was true. Jasper Monroe managed the influx with professional efficiency, screening visitors and turning away the obviously inappropriate, while allowing through those with legitimate connections to the special operations community. One visitor made it through who changed everything. He arrived in a wheelchair, pushed by a younger man who bore enough resemblance to suggest family. The veteran in the chair was missing both legs below the knee, his body bearing the visible marks of IED damage and extensive reconstruction. But his eyes were sharp, focused, burning with an intensity that made handlers step aside instinctively. "Where is she?" His voice carried across the compound with command presence that time and injury had not diminished. "Where's Angel 6? Willow emerged from the exercise yard, the dogs flowing around her like an honor guard. She stopped 10 feet from the wheelchair, recognition flooding through her with the force of a physical blow. "Sergeant Monroe." The man in the wheelchair stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving with emotion he could not contain. "You remember me." Second extraction. You took shrapnel in the abdomen and both legs, refused to be loaded until every other wounded man was aboard. Willow's voice was steady, but something beneath it trembled. "You called me an idiot for coming back." "I was right. You were an idiot." Tears were streaming down his face now, unashamed and unstoppable. "The most beautiful idiot I ever met." He reached out with arms that shook, and Willow crossed the remaining distance to accept an embrace that she had not known she needed. The man held her with fierce desperation, his body racked with sobs that had been building for 6 years. "They told us you were dead," he gasped. "They gave you 3 medals and put your name on a wall, and we had to pretend it was enough. We had to pretend that recognition made up for losing you. I'm sorry." The words were inadequate, but they were all she had. "I wanted to come back sooner. I wanted to tell you I was alive, but they said it wasn't safe. They said people were looking for me. They said—" "I don't care what they said." Marcus Monroe pulled back, gripping her arms with intensity that would leave bruises. "You're here now. That's what matters. You're here, and you're alive, and my sister wasn't crazy when she said the dogs knew something we didn't." Hazel appeared at her brother's side, tears flowing freely down her own cheeks. The family resemblance was even more striking now, united by emotion and shared history. "I told him to come," she said, "after yesterday, after seeing what happened with the dogs. I called him and told him he needed to see for himself. And I didn't believe her." Marcus laughed through his tears. "I said it was impossible. Said there was no way Angel 6 could be alive, not after what we saw. But she kept insisting, and finally I said, fine, I'll prove you wrong. I'll go to this facility and show you that whoever this woman is, she's not the pilot who saved my life. And now I'm looking at a face I never thought I'd see again." His grip on her arms tightened. "You came back for us. 3 times. When everyone else gave up, you kept coming back. And when your helicopter went down, when everything was burning," his voice broke. "We thought we killed you, by needing rescue, by being trapped. We thought our survival cost you your life. It didn't. I know that now, but for 6 years I carried that weight. We all did. Everyone who made it out of Kandahar because of you, we carried the guilt of your death on our shoulders." Marcus released her arms, wiping his face with hands that still trembled. "Do you understand what this means? Do you understand what it means to those of us who survived?" Willow did understand. She understood better than she could express. The weight of survivor's guilt was something she knew intimately, had lived with every day since crawling from the wreckage of her helicopter. The knowledge that others had died while she lived, the questions that had no answers, the burden that never fully lifted. "I understand," she said quietly. "Believe me, I understand." Marcus nodded, accepting the simple acknowledgement for what it was. The video, I saw it this morning. 3 million views, they're saying, and I thought, good, good. Let the world see. Let everyone know that Angel 6 didn't die in that helicopter. Let them see that some heroes actually get to come home. I'm not a hero. You're wrong about that. His voice hardened with conviction. You're the most heroic person I've ever met. And I've met a lot of heroes. I've served with SEALs and Rangers and Delta operators. I've watched men and women do impossible things under impossible circumstances. But none of them, not one, did what you did that night. Willow had no response. The weight of his words pressed against defenses she had built over years of denial and deflection. She had never thought of herself as heroic, had only ever thought of herself as someone doing a job that needed to be done. But maybe that was what heroism really was. Not the absence of fear, not the presence of supernatural ability, but simply the willingness to do what needed to be done when everyone else said it could not be accomplished. The crowd around them had grown, handlers and staff and visitors, all watching the reunion between a legendary pilot and one of the men she had saved. Cameras were recording, despite the media blackout. Tears were flowing freely. The moment had transcended facility protocols and military procedure. It had become something else entirely, something human. We're almost at the end, but first, if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Every share helps us reach more people who appreciate stories of hidden heroes and loyal companions. And if you haven't already, check out our previous video about the female sniper who saved her entire platoon. Links in the description. Now, let's see how this incredible story concludes. The afternoon brought developments that accelerated the timeline beyond anyone's expectations. Admiral Richardson arrived in person, his 3-star presence transforming the facility into something resembling a command post. He spent an hour in closed-door meetings with Solomon Crawford, emerging with an expression that suggested decisions had been made at levels far above their pay grades. Miss Hayes. The Admiral found her in the exercise yard, surrounded as always by the dogs who refused to leave her side. We need to talk about your future. I've been thinking about your offer. Good, because circumstances have changed. He sat down on a nearby bench, his movement carrying the weight of authority and years of responsibility. The video has forced certain conversations that were otherwise proceeding slowly. Congressional leadership wants answers. The intelligence community wants explanations. And frankly, the public wants a hero. I'm not comfortable being a public figure. I understand, and I'm not asking you to become a celebrity. The Admiral leaned forward, his eyes intense. But I am asking you to consider what your story could mean to people who are struggling. Veterans who are fighting invisible wars. Handlers who don't understand why their dogs are suffering. Families who have lost loved ones and need to believe that sacrifice means something. My story isn't inspirational. My story is complicated and classified and involves decisions that might not survive public scrutiny. Every hero's story is complicated. That's what makes them heroes instead of myths. The Admiral paused. I'm offering you a choice. Option 1, we bury everything. You go back to being Willow Hayes, anonymous civilian, and hope that whoever wanted you dead doesn't find you. Option 2, we bring you into the light, control the narrative, make you untouchable by making you too visible to eliminate quietly. Those are my only options? Those are the options that keep you alive. His voice softened slightly. I've read the classified files, Miss Hayes, all of them. I know what happened in Kandahar beyond the official reports. I know about the intelligence failures that put those SEALs in danger. I know about the political calculations that delayed rescue. And I know that someone, somewhere, decided that a dead hero was more convenient than a living witness. Willow felt cold despite the afternoon warmth. Who? We're still working on that, but the video has stirred up attention in circles that prefer to remain dark. People are asking questions that haven't been asked in 6 years. And some of those questions are making powerful individuals very uncomfortable. So, option 2 isn't just about heroism, it's about protection. It's about both. You become the public face of canine rehabilitation, a symbol of sacrifice and redemption. In return, you gain visibility that makes quiet elimination impossible, access to resources that can help you understand what really happened, and the ability to help thousands of dogs and handlers who are suffering without proper support. It was a calculation, a trade of privacy for protection, anonymity for advocacy. Not the life Willow had imagined when she walked through the facility gates 2 days ago, but perhaps a life that served purposes larger than her own comfort. The dogs stay with me. All 24 of them. Non-negotiable. I want complete authority over their treatment protocols. No bureaucratic interference. Agreed. And I want access to the classified files. All of them. I want to know who tried to make me disappear and why. The Admiral hesitated. Some of those files are above my clearance level. Then find someone whose clearance is high enough. I'm done operating in the dark, Admiral. If I'm going to step into the light, I need to understand what I'm illuminating. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft sounds of dogs breathing and the distant hum of facility operations. Finally, the Admiral nodded. I'll make calls. Open doors that have been closed for 6 years. But understand that what you find might not be what you expect. The truth about Kandahar is more complicated than heroes and villains. The truth usually is. The Admiral stood, extending his hand. Welcome aboard, Miss Hayes. Or should I start calling you Chief Warrant Officer again? Willow took his hand. Willow is fine. I stopped being a soldier a long time ago. Did you? Because from where I'm standing, you look exactly like the warrior who flew into fire to save 47 men and 24 dogs. He smiled, the expression transforming his face into something almost grandfatherly. Some things don't change just because we take off the uniform. He walked away, already pulling out his phone to begin the calls that would reshape Willow's future. She watched him go, feeling the weight of decisions made and paths chosen. The dogs pressed closer, sensing her emotional turbulence. Thor positioned himself at her right side, his solid presence an anchor in uncertain waters. Looks like things are about to get complicated, she murmured. Thor's response was a soft woof that might have been agreement or resignation or both. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Willow was photographed, documented, processed through channels that technically should not exist. Paperwork materialized that reinstated benefits she had forfeited upon her supposed death. Security clearances were renewed, access granted, doors opened that had been locked for 6 years. Through it all, the dogs remained at her side. Their presence was becoming legend within the facility, a visual reminder of the extraordinary bond that had brought Willow back to this place. Handlers who had spent years struggling to connect with these animals watched in amazement as they followed her without commands, responded to her without training, loved her without reservation. Evening arrived with the soft golden light that precedes sunset. Willow sat in the exercise yard for what might be the last time as a simple visitor, surrounded by dogs who had become the center of her new purpose. Solomon Crawford appeared at the edge of the yard, his expression contemplative. "Ma'am, may I join you?" "Of course." He settled onto the ground beside her, his movements careful in deference to joints that had absorbed too many hard landings. For a moment, they simply sat in silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. "There's something I've always wanted to ask you," Solomon finally said, "about that night, about Kandahar." "Ask." "The third extraction. Your helicopter was already damaged. You had wounded aboard. Command had ordered you to RTB. Everyone who understood the tactical situation knew that going back again was suicide." He paused. "Why did you do it?" Willow was quiet for a long moment, her hand absently stroking Thor's head as she considered the question. It was a question she had asked herself 1,000 times during long nights in hospital beds and rehabilitation centers, a question she had never fully answered. "I heard them," she finally said, "through the radio, the SEALs who were still trapped. Their voices were getting weaker as ammunition ran low. They knew they were going to die. They were making peace with it. And beneath their voices I heard the dogs." Her own voice roughened with emotion, howling, not in fear or aggression, something different, something that sounded almost like grief. She paused. The handlers were dead or dying. The dogs should have scattered, should have reverted to survival instincts. Instead, they formed a perimeter. They were protecting the wounded, fighting off enemy combatants with nothing but teeth and training. "You went back for the dogs." "I went back for all of them. But yes, the dogs, they were what made the decision. Because I had helped raise them. I had named them. I had spent months working with the breeding program before my transfer to flight operations. Willow's voice caught slightly. They weren't just military assets to me, they were family. Solomon nodded slowly, understanding something he had wondered about for 6 years. And when the helicopter went down, they saved my life. When I crawled from the wreckage, when the fire was spreading and the enemy was closing in, the dogs formed a circle around me, around all of us who survived the crash. They fought and bled and died until the rescue team finally arrived. How many? 7 dogs killed in action that night, protecting humans who had come to save them. Willow's voice hardened with old grief. They never got medals, never got recognition. Just a footnote in a classified report that most people will never read. Until now? Willow looked at him. What do you mean? The Admiral's initiative, the rehabilitation program. It's not just about treating trauma, it's about recognition, about making sure that what these animals do, what they sacrifice, becomes part of the public understanding. Solomon smiled slightly. You're going to give them the voice they never had. The realization settled over Willow with the weight of purpose finally understood. Not just healing dogs, not just treating trauma, but honoring sacrifice that had gone unacknowledged for too long. I think I'm beginning to understand why I survived, she said quietly. To speak for those who can't speak for themselves. Something like that. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun continued its descent. The dogs had arranged themselves in their familiar formation, bodies warm against Willow's legs and back. Thor's head rested on her thigh, his breathing slow and steady. It felt like peace, like the first peace she had known in 6 years. Night fell with gentle inevitability, and eventually, exhaustion claimed what contemplation could not defeat. Solomon returned to his quarters, and Willow found herself alone with the dogs who had become her reason for living. She lay back on the grass, staring up at stars that seemed closer than they had in years. Thor repositioned himself to pillow her head on his shoulder, his warmth a comfort against the cooling night air. "We did it, boy," she whispered. "We found our way back to each other." Thor's response was a soft exhale that felt like agreement. She was almost asleep when her phone rang. The number was blocked. Unknown caller. Every instinct Willow had developed during her years in the shadows screamed warning. She answered anyway. Silence on the other end, the kind of silence that exists between breathing, heavy with presence but empty of voice. "Who is this?" More silence. Then, finally, a voice that stopped her heart. "Angel 6, I know you're alive." The voice was female, familiar in ways that made Willow's skin crawl. A voice she had last heard through the static of helicopter radio, calling out coordinates as flames consumed everything. "That's impossible," Willow breathed. "You died. I saw the helicopter burn. I watched." "You saw what they wanted you to see," the voice held a bitter edge. "Just like I saw what they wanted me to see. Both of us, dead on paper. Both of us disappeared." "Raven," the call sign emerged from memory like a ghost taking form. "Raven, is that really you?" "In the flesh. What's left of it anyway." A pause. "They lied to us, Willow, about everything. Operation Crimson Dawn wasn't a rescue mission. It was a cleanup, and we were supposed to be part of what got cleaned up." Willow's mind raced, trying to process implications that rewrote everything she thought she understood. "What are you talking about? Phoenix Protocol, that's what they call it. When assets become liabilities, when witnesses need to disappear." Raven's voice hardened. "We knew too much, saw too much. They couldn't let us talk about what really happened that night." "I don't understand." "You will. Meet me in Kandahar, the place where everything started, the place where everything ended." Raven paused. "It's time to finish what they tried to bury." "Raven, wait!" The line went dead. Willow stared at her phone, her hand trembling. Thor had lifted his head, sensing her distress, his eyes reflecting the starlight with concern that seemed almost human. Raven, her co-pilot, her friend, the woman she had watched die in a burning helicopter 6 years ago. Alive. And claiming that everything Willow believed about that night was a lie. She thought about the Admiral's offer, the protection of visibility, the power of public recognition. She thought about Solomon's words, about speaking for those who could not speak for themselves. But now there was something else. A mystery that demanded answers. A conspiracy that stretched back to the night that had ended her life and begun whatever she had become since. Phoenix Protocol. The name echoed in her mind with the weight of revelation. She looked at the dogs surrounding her, at the warriors who had waited 6 years for her return, at the family she had finally reclaimed. "Looks like we're not done yet, boys," she whispered. Thor's response was immediate and unmistakable. He rose to his feet, his posture shifting from relaxed to alert. Around them, the other dogs stirred, responding to their alpha's change in demeanor. 24 military working dogs, ready for whatever came next, ready to follow their pilot into the unknown. Willow stood, feeling the weight of decisions that had not yet been made, pressing against her shoulders. The night sky stretched above her, vast and indifferent to the small dramas of human existence. Somewhere out there, Raven waited. Answers waited. Truths that had been buried for 6 years, waiting to be uncovered. And Willow Hayes, the woman who had died and been reborn, the pilot who had flown into fire 3 times and emerged from the ashes, looked up at the stars and made a promise. She would find the truth. She would expose whatever conspiracy had tried to erase her, and she would make sure that no one else suffered what she and Raven had endured. The dogs gathered around her in their protective formation, ready for whatever came next. Thor pressed against her side, his presence a reminder that she would never face the darkness alone. "All right," she said softly, "let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes." Above her, the stars wheeled in their eternal patterns, indifferent witnesses to the beginning of a journey that would take her back to the place where everything had started. Back to Kandahar, back to the truth, and forward into a future that no one, not even the people who had tried to kill her, could possibly predict. The night deepened around her, but for the first time in 6 years, Willow Hayes was not afraid of the dark. She had her dogs, she had her purpose, and she had something that no amount of conspiracy could take away. She had come back from the dead, and she was just getting started. The end. This story reminds us of a truth we often forget. Heroes don't always wear their medals on their chest. Sometimes, the most extraordinary people walk among us in ordinary clothes, carrying invisible scars from battles we'll never know about. Willow Hayes spent 6 years hiding in plain sight, not because she wanted recognition, but because she had already given everything she had. The first lesson is simple but profound. Never judge someone by their appearance. The small, quiet woman everyone dismissed was the same warrior who flew into fire 3 times to save 47 lives. The people who mocked her became the people who knelt before her. Arrogance blinds us to the greatness standing right in front of us. The second lesson comes from the dogs. 24 military working dogs recognized their savior before any human did. They teach us that loyalty has no expiration date. True bonds survive time, distance, and even death itself. Sometimes, animals understand honor better than people do. The final lesson is this: service doesn't seek recognition. Real heroes don't advertise. They simply do what needs to be done, then disappear back into the shadows. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment telling us about a hidden hero in your life, someone whose sacrifice went unnoticed. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because next week, we're bringing you another story of courage that will leave you speechless. Remember, the person serving your coffee, cleaning your office, or sitting quietly in the corner might just be the warrior who saved lives you'll never count.